The movie begins with Veronica giving a speech about her pioneering work in evolutionary tech innovations. As the presentation concludes, a student named Mike joins the class. After the class ends, Mike approaches Veronica to apologize for arriving late to her presentation, and she forgives him. He proceeds to inform her that he's a great fan of hers and has created an app that promotes a healthier lifestyle. He expresses his desire for her mentorship, but she declines, thanking him anyway. Outside the school, Veronica sees a fellow woman around her age playing with two young guys. Curious, she asks what she is doing with them, and the woman explains that, for her age, she's no longer looking for love but companionship. She enrolls in what they call a pay-to-play type of situation, where the boys satisfy her in many different ways. She also tells Veronica about a dating app in case she wants to try one. Staring at the app, which is known as Sugar Finders, she shows it to her personal assistant Andrew, to help her understand what the app does. He gets excited and explains that the app is meant for older people looking for some spark. Veronica becomes really interested in the app and tells Andrew she's interested in it, but only for business purposes, and asks him to look into it later. Meanwhile, Mike is visited by Beverly, who happens to be his sugar mummy. She visited so she break up with him because he's not satisfying her as much as she wants, brushing off his reminder about an outstanding bill by saying he didn't finish his job. Gia, Mike's girlfriend, turns out to know what her boyfriend does for work. She allowed it so Mike can use the money to take care of both of them, including their school fees. Andrew brings news about the dating app and finds a man about to leave Veronica's apartment. He stares at both of them with a sense of discomfort. When he asks about it, Veronica makes it clear that the man, Greg, is only her best friend. Focusing on business, she asks Andrew about his research on the app, and he explains that the app is quite progressive. Trying to get an in-depth analysis, she registers and swipes across profiles, finding Mike. She tells Andrew to set up a meeting with the dating app executives. Mike receives a notification on his phone about a possible match, which he tells his girlfriend, promising that this one will probably take care of their financial problems. In the morning, Veronica meets with her therapist as they discuss how she can overcome her past traumas regarding an accident that took the life of her husband. When asked about her son, she tells the therapist that her son has been traveling around the world lately. Veronica and Mike meet in a bar for their first date and Mike expresses his surprise at how she could be on such an app, but Veronica tells him that she only registered on the app for research and business purposes. Since he asked her earlier about mentorship, she sees this as an opportunity. As they get to know each other, Mike shares a story about his past, how his mom left when he was little and his dad was in the military, often not around. To pay for his school fees and pursue his goals, he had to look for other means, which included dating older women. Veronica doesn't seem to have any problems with that, but asks him if he has any girlfriend that might take his attention away from her. He says no, explaining that as long as she caters to all his financial needs, he'll do everything she demands of him. However, Veronica makes it clear that she's not in for companionship, she only needs him as a field test for the sugar dating app. In return, she would take him to tech events to connect with big tech industries. For a start, Mike demands a $10,000 fee, which Veronica thinks is ridiculous, as she thought the price would be higher. The next morning, Mike is woken up by Veronica's call, who tells him about a tech fundraising event and mentions that she would take him shopping for the perfect suit to wear. Reaching home, Mike's girlfriend presents a new outfit for him, but he shows her the one Veronica bought for him. She demands he wears it to the event, but she isn't happy about it. To cheer her up, he presents her with a necklace. Gia is happy to see it but frowns when she learns that it was bought with Veronica's money. At the event, Andrew happens to be there, and Veronica introduces him to Mike. As they are about to enter, the security tells them that the ticket was for two, meaning Veronica would have to choose between Andrew and Mike. She decides to go in with Mike, ignoring the fact that it was Andrew who bought the ticket. Inside the event, with Veronica's help, Mike is able to mingle with high-level tech gurus. When he goes to grab a drink, Beverly shows up, noticing he has another sugar mummy. She tells him to call her whenever he's done with his new one. Veronica arrives, and Beverly is surprised but eventually leaves the two of them. As they bond together, Veronica invites Mike to spend the night with her, so he texts his girlfriend, Gia, that he won't be home that night. At Veronica's place, Mike is taken to his room where he'll spend the night. She offers him to wear some of her son's clothes, considering they're of the same age. Mike is thankful for how she's taken care of him and leans forward to kiss her, only to be met with a hot slap. She reminds him that this was not their agreement, warning him to never disrespect her like that again. That same night, Beverly is taking a cold bath when she notices someone breaking into her home. Scared, she warns the intruder that she has a gun, but that doesn't scare him as he stabs her to death. Mike wakes up in the middle of the night and walks around the house to grab a glass of water. When he gets back to his room, he sees Veronica standing like one of those horror movie characters. Scared, Mike asks what she is doing, and she says she couldn't sleep and wants to apologize for the slap earlier. Mike assures her that it's alright, promising that from now on, he wouldn't do anything she doesn't want. With a sigh of relief, she offers to tuck him into bed and tell him a bedtime story, which he declines. He wakes up again in the middle of the night, turning around only to be met with Veronica's face staring at him in an eerie manner. In the morning, Veronica has already packed some clothes for him and invites him to have breakfast with them. She introduces him to Greg. Mike, who is allergic to dairy foods, tells her he needs to get home. In a harsh tone, Veronica insists he has to finish his food, but after realizing her attitude, she calms down and leaves. Greg then shares his experience of how he has come a long way as Veronica's best friend and asks Mike about his work as a sugar baby, mistakenly thinking he's a male prostitute. Offended by his words, Mike accidentally cuts his finger, and Veronica has to rush to another room to take care of the cut. Before leaving, Veronica offers him an extra payment, which he shares with his girlfriend. The news of Beverly's death is reported on the news. At school, Mike and his girlfriend discuss the death of Beverly when Veronica interrupts them. Mike introduces her to Gia, but only as friends. She suggests they go grab a smoothie. While taking a walk, Veronica tells Mike that Gia looks like she loves him, but Mike doesn't want to have that conversation. He asks if she heard about Beverly's murder. Veronica, not wanting to talk about that, informs him about the outcome of the tech event they both attended, saying one of the attendees really liked his app and would want him to come for an internship. However, she declined the offer on his behalf since she's taking care of him. Mike gets very angry, insisting that at least she should have allowed him to make his own decision first, and he walks out on her. Mike complains to his girlfriend about what happened with Veronica, and she thinks Veronica is too controlling. She suggests maybe they should look for another older lady to work with, but Mike doesn't think it's possible to find someone who pays as much as she does. As they try to get intimate, Mike suddenly looks out the window and sees what looks like Veronica staring at them, but then the shadow quickly disappears. Mike wakes up to a flurry of notifications from Veronica. When he picks up the call, she tells him she has a surprise for him, and after that, if he doesn't want to see her again, she would understand. Ignoring his girlfriend when she mentions that they have an exam that morning, Mike arrives at Veronica's place. To his surprise, Veronica shows him a new car she bought for him, making him forget all the creepy things she's been doing earlier. Meanwhile, a strange lady approaches Gia and introduces herself as Nora. She says she recognizes her from a group photo Veronica posted online and asks her to meet in a private place where they can talk, believing she might be in danger. Nora explains to Gia that she has had news that Veronica isn't what she appears to be. About 10 years ago, her sister, alongside Veronica's husband, died in a car crash after she found out that they were both having an affair. Nora thinks Veronica has something to do with the death of her sister, as it wasn't just an ordinary accident, but the police ruled it out as such. This forced her to follow Veronica for years to conduct her own investigation, and she warns Gia to be careful. After the conversation, Nora is texting on her phone when she's suddenly kidnapped. Gia checks the internet to confirm Nora's story about the car accident before calling Mike to tell him everything, but she can't reach him. Later, she gets a text from Mike asking her to wait at a spot. Suddenly, she's attacked from behind by a masked man who brutally beats her unconscious. Meanwhile, Mike is having dinner with Veronica, who tells him that she has spoken with the founder of the dating app and has scheduled a meeting. She wants him to join as her future investment. He's thrilled that finally, he can get the dream life he wants when he gets a text from Gia saying she's breaking up with him. Veronica notices his mood, so he confesses everything to her and presents Gia as his girlfriend. Veronica is offended that he's been lying to her, and Mike points out that after all, what they're doing isn't romantic. She replies that she's paying him for all of his attention. Desperate for the money, Mike ends up apologizing since Gia had already broken up with him via text. Veronica then tells him that he can spend the night at her place and takes him to a room decorated with kids' toys. Mike looks surprised but accepts to stay anyway since he doesn't have much choice. The next day, he's taken to meet with the founder of the Sugar Finders app. Veronica expresses her desire to invest in the app as a shareholder and would love Mike to be an intern in the company. Mike isn't feeling good about everything suddenly, so he excuses himself to call Gia and asks for her forgiveness, promising to end things with Veronica and be with her. At that moment, Andrew walks up to him, angry that he took his spot with Veronica. A fight ensues, and Andrew gets the upper hand, knocking Mike unconscious. Mike is taken to the hospital, where Greg says he has to draw some blood to check for injuries and infections. Mike is bothered but agrees anyway. As he hears about Gia's predicament, Mike rushes to see Gia and breaks down after seeing the condition she is in. He apologizes for not being there and reveals that he tried to reach out to her after he saw her text, but Gia never sent any message. Gia tries to warn him about Veronica, but at that moment, Veronica shows up and calls the nurse on her. Gia starts to freak out, so the nurse has to sedate her to calm her down as Mike watches helplessly and leaves with Veronica. Later, Mike becomes curious about what Gia asked in the hospital regarding the death of Veronica's husband. Veronica explains that her husband died in a tragic accident and that her son has been traveling ever since. Mike wants to see what her son looks like now, but Veronica only shows him some postcards she receives immediately, telling him to relax so they can watch a movie. After a while, Mike wakes up to a call and finds Veronica still sleeping. The call is from Andrew, who's in prison, begging him to bail him out because he only attacked Mike because Veronica told him to. He pleads for Mike to come bail him since Veronica has been ignoring him. At that moment, Veronica wakes up and takes the phone from him, warning Andrew to never call Mike again. Veronica puts on a charade, begging Mike that it's all her fault and it won't happen again. She insists she has nothing to do with Mike fighting Andrew and thinks he's only jealous because apparently, Andrew took his spot. She tells him to ignore Andrew anytime he calls. Mike wants to go home, but Veronica persuades him to spend time at her place and relax, promising he can check up on Gia in the morning. After tucking him in to sleep, Veronica closes the door behind her and locks it. She then visits Gia in the hospital. Terrified, Gia asks what she is doing there and inquires about Mike. Veronica tells her that Mike is where he belongs. Gia retorts that Mike would never be her son. With a sense of sharp pain, Gia begins to feel faint as Veronica reveals that she has already poisoned her IV drip. As Gia loses her life, Veronica watches coldly. Mike wakes up startled by the sight of Veronica sleeping next to him. She has already prepared breakfast and offers to feed him, but he pushes the food away, insisting he needs to see Gia. In his baby clothes, Mike tries to change, but Veronica has already locked the room. He searches for a way to escape but finds nothing. Mike is left locked in the room until nightfall when Greg arrives with the news of Gia's death. Mike is devastated by the news, and Greg offers to drive him home. Looking through Gia's browser history, Mike discovers that she had been researching Veronica and the car accident, finding out that her son was involved, but there was no report of him anywhere. Mike meets with Andrew in prison, and Andrew confesses that Veronica paid him to rough Mike up. As for Gia's case, it turns out she was digging too deep into the investigation and found out the truth. Andrew reveals he has been working for Veronica for 5 years as her assistant and has gained access to her personal information. One day, he discovered the truth. Veronica found out that her husband was cheating with one of his employees. She was so angry about it, but her husband denied having an affair with anyone else. Out of jealousy, she tampered with the car brakes on the night her husband was supposed to go out with his lover. Not wanting to leave their son all alone in the house, he decided to take him with them. Unfortunately, as they began to drive, the husband noticed that the brake pads weren't working, causing the car to crash. The lady managed to survive, but Veronica showed up to finish her off. When she reached her husband, he had died on impact, but things didn't turn out as planned when she saw her little boy unconscious in the backseat. Mike is curious about the son, Jason, and Andrew tells him he knows nothing about him, as if he just doesn't exist anymore. Mike then promises to drop the charges and bail Andrew out, but he insists that Andrew has to go to the police. When he gets to his car, Veronica sneaks up behind him and sedates him, rendering him unconscious. Mike wakes up to find himself locked in a basement. He tries to scream for help, but no one can hear him. It turns out that Veronica's therapist visited, and Veronica mentions that her son is back from traveling. The therapist gets excited to meet him, but Veronica reveals that it would be later. Veronica then goes to where Mike is and offers him some food. He points out that she can't just replace him with her dead son. Veronica replies that she's only a mother and will do everything in her power to be with her child. As she is about to leave, Mike suddenly calls her mom, trying to soften her up. He begs her not to leave him there, and she tells him to finish up his food so she can take him to his room. In the morning, Mike is already in his room when Veronica comes in with breakfast. As she drops it off for him and is about to leave, Mike tells her to feed him, which she gladly accepts. However, trying to do so, Mike hastily elbows her, knocking her out. He grabs the keys and frees himself. As he tries to escape, he sees a strange room and enters to check it out. To his shock, he finds Jason, who is in a coma. Checking his medical file, he sees that they needed an O-negative blood type for his blood transfusion. Trying to leave immediately, he stumbles upon the body of dead Nora. He manages to run out of the house and finds Greg. Thinking that Greg is on his side, He tells him everything, and Greg offers to help take him to the police, only to knock him out cold. Mike wakes up tied to a surgical bed, with Veronica apologizing to him for the things they're about to do to him. This is when everything dawns on him, as he realizes that everything that has been happening so far was to bring him to this point. Greg has been Veronica's personal doctor, who told her that they needed a heart transplant for her son to survive, and the blood type must be O negative, which is relatively rare. When Mike cut his hand during that last breakfast, Greg took a sample of his blood to the lab, where they discovered that his blood type was O negative. But this wasn't enough to conclude, so they needed to find a way to bring him to the hospital. That was when they made Andrew fight with him, where they discovered that he was a perfect match. With his life flashing right before his eyes, Veronica apologizes once again, telling him she did what needed to be done to bring her son back to life. Mike is then sedated as the procedure begins. Next, we see Veronica with her son visiting the therapist to announce that they will be going on vacation. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more from this channel, please like and subscribe.